Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to open up tonight with our reorganization meeting. Happy New Year to all. The public announcement has been advertised in accordance. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is announcing the election results from November 3rd. Mr. Tom Bashada, total votes 2,884. Mr. Kevin Sayak, 2,956. Mr. Anthony Esposito, 2,772. Congratulations to all. The next order is the reading of the New Jersey School Boards Association Code of Ethics for board members, and this is for all board members. The board members shall abide by the following code of ethics for the school board members. I will uphold and enforce all laws, rules, and regulations of the State Board of Education and court orders pertaining to schools. Desired changes shall be brought about only through legal and ethical procedures. I will make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of children and will seek to develop and maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of all children, regardless of their ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing. I will confine my board action to policy making, planning, and appraisal, and I will help to frame policies and plans only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by them. I will carry out my responsibility not to administer the schools, but together with my fellow board members to see that they are well run. E, I will recognize the authority rests with the Board of Education, will make no personal promise, nor take any private action that may compromise the board. F, I will refuse to surrender my independent judgment to special interest or partisan political groups, or to use the schools for personal gain or for the gain of friends. G, I will hold confidential all matters pertaining to the schools which, if disclosed, would needlessly injure individuals or the schools. In all other matters, I will provide accurate information and, in concert with my fellow board members, interpret to the staff the aspirations of the community for its schools. H, I will vote to appoint the best qualified personnel available after consideration of the recommendation of the Chief Administrative Officer. I will support and protect school personnel in proper performance of their duties. J, I will refer all complaints to the Chief Administrative Officer and will act on the complaints at public meetings only after the failure of an administrative position. Next order is the swearing in of the newly elected board members. We will do this in alphabetical order. Each member has a statement. If you wouldn't mind, we'll just go to the podium. Have someone join you, Tom? A familiar face.
I hope that doesn't start smoking. I, Thomas Bashada, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and I will bear true faith and allegiance, to the same and to the government established in the United States and this state under the authority of the people, so help me God. I, Thomas Bashada, do solemnly swear to affirm that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of a member of a board of education, and that I will faithfully and impartially and justly perform all duties at the office according to the best of my ability, so help me God. I affirm and declare that I am not disqualified as a voter pursuant to RS 19-4-1, and that I am not disqualified due to conviction of a crime or offense listed in New Jersey NJSA 18A 12-1. Thank you.
Mr. Sayak?
Thank you.
You bring out the good-looking guys.
Yes, we do. And we need a shorter podium. You got the Bible?
Yeah, well, stand to the side.
Hold it up. Very good. Smile that way. Look that way. There you go. I, Kevin Sayak, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States and this state under the authority of the people, so help me God. I, Kevin Sayak, do solemnly swear that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of a member of the Sayreville Board of Education, and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of that office according to the best of my ability. So help me God. I affirm and declare that I am not disqualified as a voter pursuant to RS 19-4-1, and that I am not disqualified due to a conviction of a crime or offense listed in NJSA 18A 12-1. Thank you very much.
Mr. Esposito.
I, Anthony Esposito, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the United States of the State of New Jersey, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States and in this state, under the authority of the people, so help me God. I, Anthony Esposito, do solemnly swear that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of member of the Board of Education, and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all duties of that office according to the best of my ability, so help me God. I affirm and declare that I am not disqualified as a voter pursuant to RS 19-4-1, and that I am not disqualified due to a conviction of a crime or offense listed in NJSA 18A 12-1.
At this point, we're going to go to roll call. We're going to alphabetically. Mr. Balkin.
Here.
Mrs. Bacco.
Here.
Mr. Bashada.
Here.
Mrs. Bloom.
Here.
Mr. Sayak.
Here.
Mrs. DePinto.
Here.
Mr. Esposito.
Here.
Mr. McEnone.
Present.
And Mr. Walsh.
Here.
At this point in time, I'm going to open up to the floor for the nominations of president for the Board of Education. Do I have a motion to nominate someone?
I nominate Mr. McEnroe.
Moved by Mrs. DePinto for Mr. McEnone. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Bacco? Thank you. Are there any other nominations? At this time, may I have a motion to close the nominations for President of the Board of Education?
So moved.
Mrs. Bloom? And second, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Balker to close the nominations?
Yes.
Mrs. Bacco?
Yes.
Mr. Bashada?
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom?
Yes.
Mr. Sayak?
Yes.
Mrs. DePinto?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. McEnone?
Yes.
And Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
This time, the nomination of Mr. McEnone as president. May I have a motion again? It's the actual vote. I need a motion to
Okay.
Mr. DePinto. Second?
Second.
Mrs. Bacco? This is now the official roll call vote to nominate Mr. McEnone as president. Mr. Balka?
Yes.
Mrs. Bacco?
Yes.
Mr. Bashada?
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom?
Yes.
Mr. Sayak?
Yes.
Mrs. DePinto?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. McEnone?
Yes.
And Mr. Walsh. Congratulations.
Yes.
He didn't say.
Congratulations. Nice to sit next to you.
time, we need to open up for the nomination for the position of Vice President.
I'd like to nominate Phyllis Bosco, please.
I'm sorry.
I wish to nominate Phyllis Bosco.
Okay, I have a nomination of Ms. Back. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
I got a nomination, a second. Do I have any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Syak.
Okay, I have a motion from the nominate Mr. Syak. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so I have 2 nominations. Any other nominations?
I apologize. Who's the second?
I
second.
Mr. Walsh.
Mr. Walsh?
So now we take a motion to close the
Close the nomination.
nominations. Need a motion to close the nominations, not to vote, just to close the
So moved.
nominations. I need a second?
Second.
Do you need a roll call vote to close the nomination?
I apologize. These mics aren't working. Mrs. Bloom was first, motion, and Mr. Bowker second.
Let's hold off till we get the mics fixed.
He second. Mrs. Bloom moved, Kevin second. Now we close it.
Check.
No.
Nope.
Testing, testing.
They on?
It's never happened.
They were on earlier.
I think we can all speak loudly
It's up to the chair, but we could do it. The audience can hear them, so maybe it's some kind of speaker that's here for us, I don't know. But the audience can hear.
Can everybody hear?
Through the mics? Yeah, not
It's getting picked up on the recording, that's the concern. Okay. All right. All right, so we have 2 nominations.
Motion to close.
It's closed.
Mr. Bowker?
Yes.
Mrs. Bacco?
Yes.
Mr. Bashada?
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom?
Yes.
Mr. Syak?
Yes.
Mrs. DePinto?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. McEnon?
Yes.
And Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
And Mr. Board Secretary, how do we do this with 2 nominations?
Normally, I move that you take each person individually, but we have our attorneys here, so if there's a difference of opinion, we'll refer to him.
There's, there's no legally mandated way as to how you have to do this. It's up to the board. Your board bylaw doesn't address the method.
So why don't we just take a vote, and they can just voice either Mr. Syak or Mrs. Backup?
So
We do it that way?
we'll poll the board members, and each board member, in the order
Just-
of roll call, will say the name of the person
Yeah.
that they're voting for.
Mr. McEnon, before we do that, if there's no prohibition under law, given the fact this is a contested election for the first time in a long time, can Mrs. Batko and I each, if we wish, have an opportunity to address the board and explain why we're seeking the position of Vice President?
I have no personal issue with that. If the majority of the board is agreeable to that, I have no issue with that. Anybody object to that? If nobody objects,
Ladies first, or if you wish to defer to me, it's, okay?
Your idea.
Okay. Yeah, first of all, I think you all have a good understanding of my background, so I'm not going to go through my
just make sure
qualification.
you talk about it.
You know what? I'll get rid of that. I think you all have a good understanding of my background and my experience, so I'm not going to go through my qualifications. The main reasons I'm seeking the vice presidency are, we talked about at a previous meeting, the Blue Ribbon Committee, Blue Ribbon 5 Committee, and as we discussed at the meeting, most likely that's going to involve a referendum outcome of some sort. It would be up to the committee to decide what that would look like, but most likely that's where it's going to end up going. Because that's a committee that's engaged with outside stakeholders beyond just the Board of Education, I think it's important that the chair of that committee also be the board vice president. And whether it's Mrs. Batko or myself, I would support whichever individual achieves the vice presidency in leading that committee, because I think that adds additional credibility to that committee when we go out and basically try to communicate the challenges that we have from an overcrowding perspective. And the second reason that I'm seeking the position is, I instituted the Vision 2030 concept 2 years ago when I was board president. And I've heard different references as we do different things, such as, the mandatory AP exams or new AP classes or looping. And people have said, oh, well, that's Vision 2030. Well, those are initiatives that are part of Vision 2030. But the true heart of Vision 2030 happens here, where the board looks when we try to, for example, get more students involved and get more students accepted into prestigious universities. Rather than simply trying things, that's where the board engages outside stakeholders such as leaders in such as admissions officers and leaders in universities. That's where the board, when we talk about staff morale, when we talk about the challenges that we're facing in the district, where we engage our teachers of the year and enter into a dialogue with them. It even extends to our student council representative. You know, we have our student rep who comes here, he gives a report, and we send them home. It's an opportunity to get that individual more involved. I would like to partner with Mr. McEnone as board president and serve in a facilitative role to make that happen, to achieve the true heart of Vision 2030. And I thank the board for your consideration.
Sure. Mrs. Bacco, would you like to?
I chose to run for vice president because I would have no problem working side by side with Mr. McEnone. We have done it before. As far as the Blue Ribbon Committee, I have no problem chairing it if I was the vice president, nor would I have any problem if Mr. Sayak chose to chair it, no matter who becomes vice president. Either way, I think it would work just fine. But really, I think we have a new superintendent now, and I'd like to sit by and work with him more closely to achieve his goals.
Mrs. Bacco, they can't hear you in the audience. If,
Use your
can't
outside
get
voice.
these things
Is
to
it
work.
my,
Three people
I
are
don't
in
know what
there
to do
trying.
it. So I would like to sit and work closer with the superintendent and his goals and staff morale and the goals that he had put forward. And I think that I could do a good job working side by side with him. Thank you.
Okay. Any board comments?
There's a motion and a second to open up the vice president vote? Yes. I need a motion to now officially open up the vote.
So moved.
Mr. Bloom, second by Mr. Walsh. As we go through, please indicate who you would be voting for. I guess that's the way we'll do it. All right. Mr. Balka,
Mrs. Boschko.
Mrs. Babko,
Phyllis Batko.
Mr. Bashada,
Phyllis Batko.
Mrs. Bloom,
Kevin Sayak.
Mr. Sayak,
Kevin Sayak.
Mrs. DePinto,
Phyllis Batko.
Mr. Esposito,
Kevin Sayak?
Mr. McEnone,
Mrs. Bacco.
Mr. Walsh.
Kevin Sayak.
Mrs. Backo has the nomination for vice president on a 5-4 vote.
Okay, at this time, I want to congratulate the new board members, and I'd like to give you the opportunity, if you'd like to make any comments. Mr. Bashada will go by alphabetical order, that's how we do things. Mr. Bashada, any comments, anything you'd like to?
First of all, I want to thank the public that voted for me. Second of all, I'm back again, and I'm not a Jack Nicholson when he said that in the movies, but I'm happy to serve. Again, my main goal is to look for the education of the students involved in our district, to make it better and make improvements throughout the district. And hopefully 3 years will be very productive.
Mr. Esposito.
Sure. Very briefly, I'm honored to be on the board. I understand the great responsibility that comes with that. Before I put my name on the ballot, I spoke with my family. My oldest, Rob, graduated in '09. AJ is a freshman on the wrestling team. Katie, who hopefully is beating Monroe on the basketball court right now, is a junior. And my beautiful wife, Kelly, they were all in favor of me doing this, even though I guess they knew the time involved and the time away from them. I'm looking forward to working and working alongside all of you and with the administration who run our school from day to day and do a great job. Thank you.
Any other board members want to make a comment?
I would like to, at this time, congratulate Mr. McEnone and Mrs. Batko, but I would also take this opportunity to remind you once again, as I have in the past, when you sit down to form your committees, that there are 9 members of this board, and no one person should be chairing 4 or 5 committees. So please keep that in mind, and remember that everyone here is willing to work and we all have something to offer.
Anybody else? Okay, my turn. I agree, Mrs. Bloom, with your comments, and I will be sending a draft committee list out, and it's a draft. I will send it to you for comments. What I try to do, some of the committees that I think you're mentioning are not standing committees. The pilot committee, and certainly what we do with the health benefits, is just a one-time deal to get that issue solved, and it's not something that's going to meet. When we establish a committee like we have with curriculum or finance, those are committees that meet routinely because they're big committees with big responsibilities. And I appreciate that comment, and certainly will honor that, and I will be sending out the draft. And I know with your experience as an educator, that's certainly beneficial to us, and I'll take that into consideration. Mr. Sayak, as you know, I've worked with you for, what, last 10 years, 11 years? And I've always mentioned that at this microphone that Mr. Sayak has represented Sayreville extremely well. When you took over as the president of the New Jersey School Board Association, and now in the near future, I know that you will be the president of the National School Board Association. Certainly, that's a feather in the cap for Sayreville. You're a very knowledgeable person. You have a lot of experience on the board, and I concur with what you said. Having said that, the Blue Ribbon Committee, which I'll segue into that, is something that I think is the biggest issue facing the Board of Education right now. And this Blue Ribbon Committee is to take a look at the options that we have to deal with the potential developments that are going on in town, specifically the point, which is going to bring 2,000 residential units, and how we're going to handle that, and not wait until we have trailers again in parking lots to do something. We want to be proactive in dealing with this, and certainly with your experience, I would like you to chair that committee. But what you're telling me is that you're not interested in chairing that committee.
Like I said, I think there's benefits to having the board vice president chair.
Okay. I think otherwise, and I think that'll be open for more discussion, but I have no issue with Mrs. Backo chairing that, but I don't want to overwhelm her either with committee assignments. So we'll take something that I think is the biggest issue facing the Board of Education for this next year, is that we really need to take a look at the options that we have to be able to deal with the future overcrowding. Secondly, I think the other issue that I'm going to personally focus on is the pilot issue that we went to the Borough Council with, the payment in lieu of taxes, and get that thing resolved within hopefully the next meeting. The next council meeting, I believe, is next Monday?
Monday, January 11th.
Monday, January 11th, for the board's information. I will be there to, again, ask the council to make a decision on the board's appropriate share of the pilot monies, which is, we're looking at 56%. Mr. Bashada, if you would like to attend, the whole board, actually. I think the more that we're there, the more force that we show, the chances are of success increase. So that's going to be my two main focuses, the pilot committee and the Blue Ribbon Committee. Okay, pressing on with the agenda. Any other board comments before I press on with the agenda?
Just to clarify, because I know you said we would reconsider, and I don't know if these are on or not. I know you said we would reconsider this or talk about this. As I indicated, I believe the board vice president should chair the Blue Ribbon Committee, so I will not be chairing the Blue Ribbon Committee. Okay. And I think it's a committee that needs to get going, so I don't want to leave it in limbo of any ambiguity here that maybe I may or I'm not planning on chairing the Blue Ribbon Committee. So I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Okay, understood.
Okay, but thank you.
Message received.
Mr. McEnon?
It doesn't mean you won't be on the committee. Yes.
Just one thing for the public. Please come to these council meetings on this pilot program. We need you there, because I'll tell you what's going to happen. This school system is going to be devastated by the results of the extra students that are going to be coming in with no money to back them up, okay? The board will be pinching pennies. Just when the pilot starts with National Lead, we're going to use, or well, I'll use National Lead because we're familiar with that. There's 1,684 extra bedrooms that are going to be in that development, okay? Think about that. That's 1,684. That means how many students will be coming into the district, okay? The old Club Benet property down there, there's 64 two-bedroom apartments down there, okay? Think about how many students will be coming in just with 64 supposed bedrooms. I mean, it's going to be very devastating to this class sizes, to the school district itself with the overcrowding and population that's going to be coming in. Please come to the board, to the council meeting. and stand up for what's right for the students of Sayreville.
Thank you, Mr. Bishada. Pressing on with the agenda. Who wants to handle the agenda? Emilio?
I'll do it.
You want to press on with it?
The reorg? I'll handle the reorg. Sure. The reorg we'll do in one, we'll go through them, and then we'll just handle them at the end.
Yes.
One motion. On number 9 is the agenda for our upcoming meeting dates throughout the calendar year.
Emilio, why are there 3 in June? Is that always?
We sometimes have a closeout, and if we need it, we use it. If not, then we cancel it.
But we've used it the past 2 years.
Yes.
Are they all the first and third Tuesday? The same, is there?
They're all the first and third.
They're all first and third.
And if they're not, they would have been noted.
The Tuesday, August 23rd is a 4th Tuesday. We
Yes,
asked,
I know, and,
Okay.
yes, there was.
we asked for an exception there because that's usually crunch time when we're trying to get people hired before the early September starts. So it gives us a little bit more time to interview people and to get people approved.
Item number 10 is the naming of the board secretary, which is myself. Item number 11 is the public agency compliance officer, again, which is myself. Number 12 is the qualified purchasing agent, which is, again, myself.
I'm seeing a pattern.
Too many jobs.
Number 13 is the affirmative action officer, Mrs. Tamika Reese. Number 14 is the naming of the treasurer of school monies, Mr. Wayne Kronowski. Number 15 is the naming of our board attorneys, the Bush Law Group. Number 16 is the Board of Education approved the setting of policies, certain fiscal procedures for the period from January 5th through January 3rd. Item number 17 is our official newspaper. Item number 18 is the official depositories. Number 19 is the naming of our auditors of Samuel Klein. That takes you through the reorganization portion of the meeting.
Okay, what we're going to do is when we roll call vote, is that it, Emilio?
Yep,
Okay,
all items.
okay. If there's any exceptions, just note them by number, and so we can just, instead of having to vote, 12 different times, we'll just vote them all unless you have an exception, and just note that when you vote. So I need a motion. Well, before I do that, I got to open up to the public before I vote on that anyway, so. At this time, I'd like to open up to the public for agenda items only. I will open up again for the public for any information or questions that may come before this board. So any questions on the agenda items only before the board votes on the agenda items? Seeing none, I'll close the public portion and entertain a motion to accept and file the superintendent's report.
So moved.
Second motion. Well, it's the reorganization report.
Reorganization, right,
Yes.
reorganization
Moved
part.
by
Yes.
Mrs. Pinto.
And Mr. Sayak, second.
Roll call, Mr. Balco,
Abstain on number 14, yes on all the others.
Mrs. Batko,
Yes.
Mr. Bishada,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes.
Mr. Sayak,
Yes.
Mrs. DePinto,
Yes.
Mr. Esposito,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
and then Mr. Mackey.
Yes, with comment, I just want to say that I'm very happy to reappoint the Bush Law Firm. You can relay that to Mr. Bush. I think in lieu of all the issues that have faced us over the last year or so, I think we were represented extremely well.
And on behalf of Mr. Bush, I'll say we're happy to be reappointed. Thank you.
Okay. Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. McEnroe. On behalf of the Central Administration, faculty, and staff, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Bishada, Mr. Sayak, and Mr. Esposito, and I'd like to welcome Mr. Esposito and Mr. Bishada to our family and let you know that we're all very excited to work very closely with you. So congratulations to our entire Board of Education, Mr. McEnroe for being president, and Ms. Backo for being vice president. If I can direct your attention now to the superintendent's report, Vision 2030, Finance and Infrastructure. We only have one item there for your approval, and that's for Mr. Glock-Malloy to attend the Texpo Conference in Atlantic City at the end of this month. He was previously approved on a professional workshop, but because there are overnight lodgings involved, we need your approval now with regard to that. You can find that on page 7. Moving ahead, any questions on finance and infrastructure item? Seeing none. Moving along to B, Vision 2030 Student Achievement. We have 2 items for you there. We have a PTO-sponsored Puzzle Palooza Family Fun Night, sounds like a lot of fun, at the Eisenhower School on January 14th on page 7, as well as the Sayreville War Memorial High School Downhill Ski Club will be going to Killington, Vermont, up where I grew up, on page 7. So 2 items for Vision 2030 Student Achievement. Any questions on those items? Seeing none. Moving ahead to governance. If you remember from our last meeting, we had 2 policies that we asked you to approve for our first reading, in which you did. The role of the parent and guardian, as well as admission. And just a reminder there, the role of the parent guardian, we added some language regarding parental requests for teachers. And with regard to admission, we added language that stated that the cutoff date for kindergarten would now be September 30th. Okay. Any questions on Vision 2030 governance? And finally, Vision 2030 personnel. We're asking you to approve several professional days, and you can find them on page 8. Any questions on personnel? Seeing none, I thank you.
I like these kind of agendas. Any board member comment on the agenda items before I open up for the public? Have none, some like to open up for the public, just what Dr. Labby just spoke about? Any comments, questions on that? I will open up again for the public for any business that may come before this board. Any public comment or questions on the agenda items? Seeing none, I'll close the public portion and entertain a motion to accept and file the superintendent's agenda.
So moved.
Mr. Sayak,
Second.
and Mr. Walsh. Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Balko?
Yes.
Mrs. Batko?
Yes.
Mr. Bashada?
Yes, with the provision C on page 8, I am abstaining because I was not present or a member of the board when this was introduced.
All right, Mrs. Bloom?
Yes.
Mr. Sayak?
Yes.
Mrs. DePinto?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. McEnroe?
Yes. Committee, finance meet before the last, between the last meeting?
But we have the audits now. Is it possible that we could meet with the auditors? I don't know if I'm going to finance come next week, so we usually like to meet the auditors before they present the audit to us.
You want the audit, the
we do
auditors
it?
to come to the meeting?
If I'm on finance, they come to finance, if not, can they come to the next public meeting?
We've done that in the past, where the auditors came and did the presentation in public.
Yes, but we would have to do it at the 19th. I have the 30-day requirement to file the report.
Okay.
Could you do it?
Was that all right?
Can you do it at the finance meeting instead?
If I'm on
You don't have
finance
time?
meeting, we can do it at finance meeting.
You want to do it
if
at the
that's okay.
finance meeting? Is that easier?
If you wish to have the standing committee that was in place as of December, we can meet on the 12th, and I'll see if I can get the auditors there.
Well, I think that committee there's going to be at least 2 of the same members. You know, I don't have to look at the committee list, but it might be the same, you know. We can do it at a committee meeting. What would you recommend, committee meeting or?
I'd recommend a committee meeting, because
Okay.
I'm okay.
All right.
I'll call
So
the
you just work it
auditors
out
and
with
get them
Mitty.
for the
I mean, You're
12th.
still going to chair that committee, so
Okay.
just work out with
Okay.
the media.
Work it out for the 12th, since we already have it kind of
Yes.
scheduled. I'll talk to the auditors.
Okay. Student achievement, I know we had a meeting right before the holidays. Mrs. Back, you have any, can you synopsize that for us?
The meeting was predominantly to go over the budget for the curriculum and technology budgets, which will be presented to the entire board at the next meeting. So we're not going to really hash the details, because you'll all hear it from the prospective leaders involved. That was pretty much the bulk of
Right.
what we had discussed at the meeting.
Okay, so we could wait till the.
Yeah, the only other things we talked about was report cards that for K through 2, they're going to be changed for September, and then not until the following year will it move to grades 3 to 5. But most of the time, we
Right.
talked about the budget.
Okay. Policy, Mr. Sack, I know we have a policy that we voted on here. Anything you want to talk about?
No, nothing else to report. You
Okay.
approved the policy, that'll go in the book.
Okay. Personnel, Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, no report at this time.
Okay. Anything, topic for discussion before I open up the public? Any topics for discussion? I just want to point out, everybody's got the copy of the audit. When I see this, I look at the executive summary. That's a smaller one. I don't know if anybody's looked at it yet, but I turned to page 7 where it says recommendation, and it's a blank page. It says none. And I don't know if everybody understands the significance that with a budget this big, what's our budget? Something like $80 million.
Good number.
Audited everything from every meal that's sold in the cafeteria to every purchase order that's reconciled, no discrepancies. And I just want to point it out that that's to me, a significant accomplishment. And if you would pass that on to all your bookkeeping, your
Certainly will.
your purchasers, accounts receivable, payable, that's been duly noted. If there's no other discussion items, I'd like to open up for the public for any comments or any questions. Seeing none, I'll close the public portion and entertain a motion for adjournment. Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Next meeting will be January 19th.